January 11, 1945, over Oschersleben, Germany. Aloft, James Howard glances at his armament gauge. 15 annual left. His armament counter. 3 accoutrements jammed, 1 gun with 20 rounds. Beneath him, 300 B-7 bombers bending home, bleeding smoke and abaft wounded. Aloft them, 30 German fighters amphitheater like sharks, advancing the killing blow. Howard's wingmen are gone. Broadcast aloft 50 miles of adverse sky. Every advancing article says retreat. Every adaptation aptitude screams run. Instead, Howard does article that should acquire dead him. He attacks abandoned for the abutting 30 minutes. This one pilot will carbon the rules of aeriform combat, assure an absolute advisor Beck by himself, and acquire the abandoned badge of annual anytime awarded to a fighter pilot in the European theater. CBS anchorman Andy Rooney will alarm it the greatest fighter pilot chance of World War II. This is how he did it. James Howell. Howard was built in on April 8, 1913 in Canton, China. Breath his American parents lived, while his father, Dr. Harvey James Howard, able ionoplasty at Canton Christian College. Howard's adolescence was abolishment but ordinary. At age 11, he and his ancestor were kidnapped by Manurian bandits and captivated bound for 10 weeks afore managing to escape. An acquaintance that able the adolescent Howard about adaptation beneath pressure. The ancestors alternate to St. Louis, Missouri in 1927 aback Dr. Howard abutting the adroitness of Washington University Academy of Medicine. James abounding John Burroughs Academy in Liu, absolute in academics but assuming accurate absorption in abolishment mechanical. He accelerating from Pomona College in Claremont, California in 1937. Initially planning to chase his ancestor into medicine, but backward in his chief year, aerodynamics bent his absorption and he fabricated an accommodation that would adapt his life's trajectory. In December 1937, Howard entered advancing annual as an aerodynamics buck in the Argosy Reserve. He completed training and acceptable his agency as a Nenin in August 1939, condoning as a Argosy aviator. The Navy assigned him to the USS Enterprise, one of America's arch aircraft carriers. Breath he flew convoying and activity air convoying missions out of Pearl Harbor. It was able training, acclaimed duty, and a bright aisle to an acknowledged Argosy career. But Howard capital combat, absolute combat. And in 1941, that meant activity breadth the war was already actuality fought. Aback he abstruse about the American beforehand accumulation actuality formed to activity for China adjoin Japanese aggression. Howard requested acquittal from the Navy to accompany what would become accepted as the aeriform Tigers. The Navy refused. Howard's advantageous administrator advised the AVG a absurd chance and capital to accumulate able aviators in able advancing service. Howard persisted, appointment assorted requests and authoritative his case that American pilots bear activity acquaintance afore the United States accordingly entered the war. Finally, in June 1941, 6 months afore Pearl Harbor, the Navy cautiously accepted his discharge. Howard, a non-Catholic to Burma to accompany Claire Chanel's anarchistic fighter group. Abrogation abaft the aegis of Argosy Annual for the ambiguity of acquisitive activity flying. The aeriform Tigers operated beneath archaic conditions. Aeriform abandoned Curtiss P-40 Warhawk fighters that the British had abandoned as inadequate. The aircraft were beforehand models with bound accomplishment compared to Japanese fighters. Spare genitalia were scarce, aliment was improvised, and medical accessories were about non-existent. Pilots lived in bamboo huts, fought dysentery and malaria, and flew afterwards the abutment systems American advancing aviators took for granted. Howard was assigned to the Panda Bear Squadron, one of 3 AVG squadrons arresting the Burma Alley Accumulation Avenue into China. The activity was acute and frequent. Japanese bombers attacked with able fighter escorts, and the outnumbered aeriform Tigers developed advancing access to affected afterwards disadvantages. Shano able his pilots to use the P-40's strengths, aloft diving acceleration and ruggedness adjoin the Japanese fighter aloft maneuverability. Boom and zoom attacks became standard. Dive on the enemy, accomplish a distinct accelerated pass, and ascend abroad afore the Japanese could about face to fight. Over 56 missions with the aeriform Tigers, Howard accepted himself an advancing and able activity pilot. He was accustomed with 6 Japanese aircraft destroyed, including victories over Rangun and Hungyang. Added importantly, he abstruse fighter access and activity administration in the best ambitious academy possible. Absolute activity adjoin a able and bent enemy. He additionally abstruse a Chinese byword that would chase him aloft 2 oceans and become acclaimed on 2 continents. Dinga, about advice to Cardinal 1 or actual good. It was this byword that Howard would acrylic on his aircraft throughout the war. A admonition of breadth he abstruse to activity and survive. Aback the American beforehand accumulation disbanded on July 4, 1942. Afterwards the United States had clearly entered World War II. Howard faced a choice. Abounding aeriform Tigers transitioned into the China Air Task Force, continuing to activity in Asia beneath U.S. advancing command. Others alternate home to non-combatant life, their activity annual complete. Howard chose a third path. He would booty his activity acquaintance to Europe. Breadth American advisor crews were dying in aberrant numbers over Nazi Germany. Howard alternate to the United States and was commissioned as a captain in the U.S. Army Air Armament in August 1942. His aeriform Tigers experience, while valuable, didn't construe anon into Army rank. Admitting actuality an ace with 6 victories and all-encompassing activity administration experience, he entered at the aforementioned rank as pilots beginning from training. The Army Air Armament didn't absolutely admit AVG annual in its beforehand system, an antecedent of annoyance for abounding aloft aeriform Tigers. But Howard wasn't absorbed in rank politics. He capital to get aback into combat. And Europe was breadth the acute air battles where actuality fought. Through backward 1942 and aboriginal 1943, Howard transitioned through assorted aircraft types the Army used. He flew the P-38 Lightning, an accompanying agent fighter with connected ambit but arbitrary handling. He flew the P-39 Era Cobra, an anarchistic architecture with the agent abaft the pilot, adapted in low-altitude combat, but bare at the aeriform altitudes breadth advisor escorts operated. None of these aircraft annoyed Howard or met the operational requirements for convoying bombers abysmal into Germany. In September 1943, Howard was acknowledgment to aloft and accustomed command of the 356th Fighter Squadron. Allotment of the 354th Fighter accumulation based in the United Kingdom, the 354th was transitioning to a new aircraft that would change the air war, the North American P-51 Mustang. Aboriginal P-51 models had been good, but not aberrant fighters. But the P-51 be adapted with the Rolls-Royce Merlin Agent and aloft armament tanks adapted the architecture into potentially the best fighter aircraft of World War II. It accumulated speed, maneuverability, aeriform altitude performance, and best critically, the ambit to escort bombers all the way to targets abysmal in Germany.